contribution, I just need to acknowledge some of the input that I've received. Far too much, as of those of you who've been working on this bill know, far too much input to have enough time in a half an hour to cover everybody's points. But there are a few organisations that I'd like to name as contributing significantly to my understanding of the science around and the facts and the evidence base around this highly complex and very emotional issue. And if I just list them, the Canine Welfare Alliance of Australia and the various members of that who contributed last year, to my understanding. Ken Storr, Senior Lecturer at Challenge TAFE, who's involved in the presentation of the Cert 3 and 4 on animal behaviour management that specifically looks at this area. A former local government ranger himself, who is very passionate about trying to get this legislation improved. The WA Anti-Breed Specific Legislation organisation, and as you will remember if you were in the House yesterday, over nearly 13,000 people have signed petitions to try and alert the Minister to some of the potential gaps in this legislation, or perhaps gaps not the right word, to the way this allows the door to be kicked open on some possibly very negative consequences for many breeds in WA. Thanks to the RSPCA WA for their contribution. Thank you to the Working Kelpie Council of Australia, the WA chapter, who provided advice last year on this. And to Oscar's Law, the group that looks specifically at ways of eradicating the practice of the intensive farming of dogs and puppy farms and the like around Australia. They're just some of the many, many substantial submissions that I received. Many, as I said, many of these points I can't cover in half an hour, but I'll try and pick most of them up in the consideration and detail stage. I'm sure many of us from both sides of the House will have some comments around there. And just before I start on my comments, also to acknowledge that I have received submissions from veterinarians with animal management master's degrees and the like from all over the world, from vets who have been posted and worked all over the world in this area, from doctors who work on people who have been attacked by a dog, and from various other animal management experts. And I point all that out because I do hope to speak from a position of fact in my presentation rather than emotion. And I said at the beginning, this is a very emotional debate, but I would like to present some of the scientific evidence and the facts around this issue. And I'd like to start by talking about the aim of this bill. And in your explanatory memorandum, Minister, you talk about the purpose of the bill being to introduce a range of measures that will provide greater protection for the community and improve the controls on dogs according to current community expectations. Some of the good points in what work has been done, and I should also say thank you both to the staff from your office, Minister, who have provided me with the response to many furtive phone calls saying, but what happens if, and what happens if this, and can you provide information about that? They've been really, really helpful, thank you. And to the many agencies I know who have contacted and had meetings with the Minister's staff, thank you. The good parts of this bill, you've heard my colleague, the member from Mandurah, talk about the widening of the bill to recognise assistance dogs and anyone, and we've all got assistance dogs working with our residents in our areas, whether they be blind, guide dogs for the blind, or hearing dogs, or any other kind of assistance dog to deal with sensitivities that people have and various conditions that they have. Dogs are an immeasurable part of our society and contribute immeasurably to our society, and they are an inherent part of our communities these days in many, many ways. And this is a very medical and health-related isolated way, rather than the in addition to what is a very positive mental health contribution to the well-being of our community. Recognition of the role of commercial security dogs is also well and truly overdue, and I acknowledge that that's a very good part of this bill. A small conundrum, something which I completely agree with, is the recognition that greyhounds don't actually need to be muzzled in public. You know why? Because greyhounds are really nice dogs. Right. They don't attack people by and large. They don't go after things. They are a trained creature in a racing establishment and are programmed. It has nothing to do with their genetics. Genetics has to do with the synapses and the chemical components of a body. They do not predicate behaviour, and they do not predicate it in the case of a greyhound. So I know my colleague, the member for Gosnells, has a retired greyhound who has been well trained and attended courses and is a very valued member of his community. This is a very good thing. It's in stark contrast to the bringing in of controls over a different set of dogs, because at this moment in our community, a particular style of dog is currently considered to be the enemy. And if you look back historically, in 1929, I think the first legislation went through Parliament claiming that German Shepherds were dangerous dogs. And that came, I think, mainly through our farming community, who thought they were going to all breed with dingoes and kill all the sheep. Doesn't that seem ridiculous now? German Shepherds are not dangerous dogs. They are dogs. They are no more dangerous than any other dog, unless they're trained to be that way. And let me tell you, they don't get up in the morning and say, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to train myself to attack something today. No, they don't, unless it's a tin of Pal or a dog biscuit, if they're companion dogs. We move forward to the next creature that humanity decided was going to be the subject of enemy categorisation, and I think you could say it was a Doberman, which then pounded into our consciousness as a community and became the sort of epitome of all things vicious and savage. And you know, you even see that dangerous dog picture's got fangs out and showing a dog which actually could quite easily resemble a Doberman. Very, very culturally driven, these norms. As all of our lives, we're culturally driven by the things that our community thinks is appropriate at a particular time. But I absolutely emphasise this will change. As it did after the Dobermans receded in their fear and loathing, the Rottweiler cropped up. There was one here at Parliament yesterday, Rosie, the Rottweiler, who licked just about everything she could possibly get hold of. When her owner dropped the leash for a photograph, she held her hand up and said, "Sit and stay, Rosie." Rosie never moved. The owner went miles away. The dog was in the middle of a group of strangers. It never moved. It looked at the owner, waiting for advice, waiting for connection. It never moved. Rottweilers are not dangerous dogs. They are just dogs. And the problem that we're seeing in the community at the moment is with this so-called nemesis of anything to do with a dog which might resemble in some ways a pit bull. I'll talk about that in more detail later. The other good bits about this bill are that it gives local government authorities a capacity to address complaints of nuisance dogs. And I say that quite emphatically because we all have them. We all have people in our communities who knock on our doors and say, "Can you help me? The dog next door is giving me the absolute heebie-jeebies. The owners don't care for the dog. It's locked outside all day. They don't interact with the dog. The dog is going mad in the backyard. It's a crazy dog. It's a nuisance dog." Doesn't take much to realise why the dog's in that position and whose fault it is. But this does give local government rangers the capacity to deal with nuisance dogs more quickly and more effectively. The downside of that, though, is by lowering the burden of proof and lowering the definition of what a nuisance dog is, we end up with some potentially ridiculous situations occurring. And I would just mention one lady in my electorate, Joan, who came to me just before the election, I think it was. She's owned her house in Inglewood for 22 years. It's a lovely Californian bungalow. She's very happy there. She's had a dog for 9 years, and he's very cute. He's about this big and looks like a mop, really. I'm not sure what he is, but he's very cute. And her dog has happily lived with her in this home for 21 years. 6 months ago, new neighbour moved in, renting the property next door. In fact, his girlfriend was renting previously, and the new boyfriend moved in with the girl. He's obviously a light sleeper or a very susceptible person, and I suspect you would relate to this if you think about every time the magpie season comes out, people complain about magpies swooping. Or they complain about crows being too noisy, or they complain about the parrots are too noisy. So there is a level that some people cannot cope with nuisance behaviour. I understand that. But by lowering the burden of proof, the man next door to Joan and her beautiful little dog that she's had for 9 years will be able to take action to have that dog removed. Joan has been struggling. She's put collars on, she's put all sorts of things, she's done everything she possibly can. She leaves the dog inside. The neighbour is obviously not a happy bloke, and he continues to pursue her. She's got the council in to measure, she's done all the right things, but the neighbour's not a happy man. There's nothing that Joan can do about making her neighbour happier. So do you know what she's going to do? She's going to sell a house. I think this is bizarre. You might think this is a bizarre outcome, but for people in this room who don't have animals or who don't understand the kind of companion animal relationship that somebody might have, for her it's very real. This dog has been her sole companion for 9 years, and she doesn't want to live in a place any longer where every time she goes out of her front door she worries if the dog's going to be poisoned or taken away from her. So that's just one example, and it might sound extreme to you, or many of you will scratch your heads and frown and say, I can't believe anybody would be that stupid. Well, let me tell you, there's many people who would consider that a dog is part of their family and it's a companion, and they will take whatever measure to protect that. So by lowering the burden of proof as to what a nuisance is, a little dog that chases a car can be proven to be a nuisance dog. And that to me is completely dumbfounding. I cannot possibly believe that we should be lowering the burden of proof to that level. I also think that reversing the onus of proof, which simply means that if somebody has come in, if a ranger or an authorised person has come in, and as my colleague, the member for Mandurah, extensively pointed out, a dog has become labelled as a dangerous dog, it now becomes the onus of the owner of that dog to indeed prove that it's not a dangerous dog. And I think that burden of proof, the onus being swapped around, is something which holds great concern to the community of dog owners, which is an ever rapidly increasing community, and I'm sure all of us know that. They're a major part of our constituency base. Most people in the metropolitan area in particular have pets and vote, and will be really cranky if they think that all of a sudden they're the ones who are going to have to prove their dog is not dangerous. Taking out the provisions, I wanted to just mention a couple of other things. Taking out the provisions, taking out provisions concerning the care and well-being of dogs and owners' responsibilities. I totally understand why, Minister, you might think that the maintenance or the well-being of a dog, the health of a dog, making sure that it's wormed and taken to the vets and looked after in a way which is humane and appropriate is more a part of animal welfare than it is part of the Dog Act. However, I think by removing it, it leaves a gap, and it ends up by only focusing on control and order rather than on health and well-being. And I think that it would be advisable, or it'll be a very sad day to see this Act lose any reference at all to whether or not an owner cares about the well-being of their dog or the health of their dog. Local rangers are concerned about this because under the bill, as you know, they're being asked to make decisions about going onto someone's property without their permission, and making a decision about a dog is likely to attack. And we've talked in some, we've heard in some detail from my colleague about what that means. The problem is that at the moment, as I've said, the devil is seen to be a dog which resembles a pit bull, because that's the topical one. They're the only of the 5 breeds, restricted breeds, that we have in WA. Therefore, they're the ones that cop all the grief. And I have permission from the Speaker to have these slides up. So I have some pictures from that Urban Animal have given me. And I just wanted to put them out and just talk a bit about them. Would you think that these dogs are, if you were asked to go in and assess and say whether these puppies are in any way a crossbreed of a pit bull terrier, how would you make that decision? These puppies are Staffordshire crossed with Whistler's, but they have liver points and white and almond eyes, which means that they could be in the firing line very easily. And for someone who is not a trained animal management person or trained in animal behaviour or assessment, it would be easy to consider that. There's another myth around dogs that rangers might go out and be asked to assess whether that dog is a pit bull or has a pit bull in it. One of the myths is that they're not good with other pets. This dog is, in fact, looks like a pit bull, doesn't it? It looks like it's got pit bull in it. Would you be able to tell any difference unless you had DNA? No, you wouldn't. This is a Staffordshire rescued from the pound. His name's Ralph. He loves the company of the household cat, a rainbow lorikeet, and he loves meeting new dogs friends, so his little cheat sheet says. So that's Ralph. Hey? No, doesn't love him to death, no. And here's a classic dog that you would be very easily forgiven for thinking that this is a pit bull terrier. Looks like one, doesn't it? Looks like it's got pit bull in it. Sorry, that was probably not appropriate for me to do, considering that I'm on film. So this dog. May I have an extension?
Extension granted.
Thank you. Jinx is rescued from a backyard breeder. Jinx has never been in a fight. She's a happy family dog and likes social outings. Just to make sure you're aware, there's some myth information put on these as well, and they are factual. That is, these are myths, these comments, that they don't mix with other animals or that they have a locked jaw. So I'll just leave them up there while I finish. There's been, I have so much information I could go forward to tell you, but in terms of assessing whether a dog is dangerous, if you're a ranger and you've picked up a dog after a thunderstorm, yeah, so you've picked up a dog that is out of its home, it's mortally terrified because many dogs are very frightened in thunderstorms. The ranger finds the dog in order to keep it safe. Perhaps he rescues it or she rescues it, and they put they've got a pole with a rope on the end, and they whack it round their neck. New experience. I'm out of my home. I'm terrified. Some big dude with a bit of rope and wire on it's just grabbed me round the neck and shoved me in the back of a van. I have no idea what's going on. I'm then taken to a kennel or a pound somewhere. I've been to the City of Bayswater's pound. It's a concrete box. It's not at all a place that would calm a dog down. It's a concrete box. No windows, no natural light, nothing. And then the ranger is faced with having to swipe that dog to see if it's got a microchip or not. In the process of doing that, unless we're talking about people who are trained animal management specialists, so we're saying a Cert 3 or a Cert 4 in animal science, they know what to look for and what is a dog's natural reaction to stress. And make no mistake, aggression is a natural, innate behaviour of a dog to stress. And it comes from a number of different factors, be they health, because the dog is sick, be they fear, because the dog is frightened, be they hunger, because the dog is starving. All of these are natural reactions. To say that aggression is provoked in an animal is not directly correct scientifically. None of the evidence says it is. Aggression is a behaviour, a stimulus and a response situation. So if you're in that situation and the ranger tries to swipe the dog and gets bitten, He has every right to label that dog as a dangerous dog. I don't think that's okay. I seriously don't think that's okay. If a ranger wants to go into a property and confiscate puppies or a dog that they think is a mixed breed, one of these guys, they can do that. And there's no protection for the bitch who has a litter of puppies. When somebody strange comes into their backyard and grabs her from her puppies or tries to grab the puppies, there's no protection for that dog to be not accused of being a dangerous dog in this bill. She can be labelled dangerous for simply protecting her own young. In a kennel environment, I've already said, the facts I'm quoting from brochures on animal stress here. Boarding kennels is stressful. Dogs often show stress-related behaviours such as pacing, barking. Some develop diarrhoea, go off their food, worrying about their owners and the new people that they're encountering. I've talked about how hard it is to identify these dogs. In a quick look at what the characteristics are of a pit bull which are likely to be identified, I've mentioned almond eyes, short, chunky, strong, pink or liver markings, white markings. A very quick assessment of dogs that match that criteria give me 30 different breeds of dogs. So it's quite likely that a ranger will make a mistake because the dog that they think is a pit bull could be a Staffordshire cross, it could be a Spaniel cross, it could be a Weimaraner cross, it could be a Dachshund cross, it could be a Malamute cross, it could be a Dalmatian cross, and there are 25 others that it could be crossed with. So I suspect it's pretty obvious why Victoria's not only spent a goddamn fortune on prosecuting cases which have proven to be completely incorrect. So local governments have to go to the SAT when somebody says, my dog is not what you say it is, I'll take you to their SAT and prove it's not. They've had to pay for their own DNA testing, which is not an easy thing to do, I might add. And they've had to front up to court and have legal representation on some occasions and prove that their dogs are not what they're claiming them to be. There are 30 different dogs. There's many dogs that they could be. And nearly 80% of the cases that have been taken through the Victorian courts have been proven to be an incorrect misrepresentation of the breed of their dog. It's cost the local government authorities in Victoria hundreds and thousands of dollars. Can we predict which dogs will exhibit aggressive behaviours? No, we can't. And I'll read directly from Mary Ashen Young, who is a Masters in Animal Behaviour and has supplied me with some information. We cannot predict which dogs will exhibit aggressive behaviour based on the dog's breed or its perceived breed. Breed on its own is not an effective indicator or predicator of aggression. And I acknowledge, Minister, this bill tries to move to the deed, not the breed. The catch is that you're giving rangers a likely to attack, a possibility that it might be, broadening the base. You're opening the door for these dogs to be further victimised, and that's what's got the community upset. The temperament test that rangers over here are evidently going to be using will predict, cannot reliably predict which dogs will exhibit aggressive behaviour. The temperament is a term to describe a collective stable behavioural tendencies. Temperament is made up of individual personality tests. Rather than temperament tests, what are usually administered are more accurately called behavioural tests, and they are inadequate. And I have more details on that, which I'll refer to, I'm sure, in the consideration in detail. Just a thing about dog attacks too, most of them occur in the home by a dog known to the victim or the family. And so the whole notion that dog attacks might come from a stranger's dog or from someone you don't know is in fact not true. Golden retrievers are just as likely to cause attacks on people. That's the scientific evidence that I've been given, as is a Rottweiler or a Pit Bull. That's the science on the matter. The American Temperament Test Society, established to objectively evaluate the temperament of all breeds, tested 22,000 dogs, over 185 breeds. The average pass rate on these tests, assessments of their behaviour and temperament, the average pass rates of breeds tested was 80%, 80.4%. Funnily enough, the American Pit Bull Terrier passed the temperament test. We're talking about 22,000 dogs here. This is not a small test. This is scientifically valid and reliable. The American Pit Bull did 82.7%, so it actually tests better on temperament. So just to victimise one breed of dog because you assume that it is going to behave in a likely fashion, or a crossbreed, you assume it's likely to be a crossbreed, is clearly incorrect, inappropriate, and in many cases harmful. I wanted to try and talk about some of the things that I think we could do which would be positive, and I'm sure, Minister, you're aware that the Australian Veterinary Association, just the same week as, in fact, the former Minister in this area last year put out the first draft of this bill, the Australian Veterinary Association put its first public comments out to say that legislation which focuses on victimising one breed above another does nothing to lower the dog attack rates or make the community safer. In fact, it's counterproductive on many fronts. The money that we're spending on education programs and on bringing more people into training their dogs is laudable, and that's where we should be focusing this bill. There's too much capacity being given in this bill to victimising and after the event facts. So the clear and obvious message is, why are we not looking at managing dog ownership better? So actually working to stop backyard breeding and sale of dogs, that you can no longer go to the shopping centre and buy a puppy off the shopping notice board. You actually need to go to a bona fide breeder who sells you a puppy which is probably sterilised and microchipped at the appropriate time in its life. That dog can then be traced back for disease, for behaviour, for temperament, for everything, and you can actually source all the information you need. Of the, more than 30,000 dogs that are euthanised in WA every year, that would slow that rate down. The average age of a dog in this country is 4. That's scandalous. That's not because they die early, it's because we kill them early. And we kill them because we don't understand often what it is that we're bringing into our homes as a puppy. And many people certainly don't understand how to train that. So by not focusing more attention on education, so if you're going to buy a puppy, what should you look for? And making real incentives. I believe that previously the submissions around this, going back about 10 years, had far greater incentives contained in them to encourage people when they buy a dog to sign up to sterilisation, microchipping, to sign up to behaviour training programs that are run by accredited trainers, and to do a much better job at managing the front end, so you don't end up with nuisance dogs barking because some owner has no idea what they've got. I have a rescue dog, and this rescue dog was kept on a tiny deck. It's a Weimaraner, it's a male Weimaraner, it's a very big dog. And I cannot believe that when I phoned the previous owners to say, just to let them know that the dog was okay and doing well, they said, "Oh, have you managed to calm it down?" Or there's absolutely nothing wrong with this dog. It was an 18-month-old puppy. It's a big dog. Puppies are silly. It's their nature. They run about the place. They want to jump and greet you. Without the right training, without the right exercise, and with ignorance from the owner, of course you're going to have problems. I absolutely applaud the part of this bill that says that any children in the presence of these animals need to be supervised. Last week we had a horrific death in New South Wales, and I can quickly mention that the facts that I've been given about what happened. It was a large breed of dog owned by a third person, so it wasn't in its regular home. It's a dog which was trained as a hunting dog. The incident occurred, as I say, away from its home. The toddler's mother wasn't available to protect this weenie baby, so someone let a 2-year-old child run in and out of the house with an unrestrained hunting dog, which was referred to by the media as a family pet. Now, really, This is just not okay. And we're trying to euthanize dogs. Those people shouldn't have dogs in the first place. If you cannot care for them, if you do not understand how they should be trained and managed, don't let them be bought. So I would, there are many other points that I could go on. I'd particularly like to recommend the Calgary model, which of course has no breed-specific component in it, but has single-handedly, through its implementation, by raising the fines. This bill raises fines. There's a lot we'll say about capacity to pay and the type of people who might incur these fines and then find themselves liable for tens of thousands of dollars. I'll talk about that. But in Calgary, they've managed to lower the dog attacks by 70% since they implemented